There exists a particular type of consciousness that operates differently from the norm. Not superior, not inferior, simply configured along different axes of attention and meaning-making. These are individuals whose default state involves turning awareness inward, examining the machinery of their own thoughts, questioning the assumptions that others accept automatically. While most people navigate life through immediate reaction and forward momentum, these reflective minds pause, observe, and analyze the very process of their own thinking. This isn't merely introversion, though the two often overlap. Introversion describes where you direct social energy. Reflection describes how you process all experience. A reflective mind can belong to an extrovert who loves crowds but still spends hours afterward replaying conversations, extracting meaning, questioning their own responses. The defining characteristic isn't social preference. It's cognitive orientation toward depth over speed, understanding over action, analysis over acceptance. Contemporary psychology has begun mapping this terrain more precisely, moving beyond simple personality categories to understand the neural and cognitive mechanisms that create what we might call the examined life. What emerges is a portrait of minds that experience both remarkable gifts and significant burdens, often simultaneously. Modern neuroscience has identified specific brain systems that correlate with reflective thinking patterns. The most significant is the default mode network, or DMN, a constellation of brain regions including the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus that activate during rest, mind-wandering, and self-referential thought. For most people, the DMN activates periodically during daydreaming, planning, or remembering, but research suggests that individuals with highly reflective thinking patterns show more frequent and intense DMN activation. Their brains spend more time in this introspective state, even during activities that would normally engage external attention networks. This has profound implications. It means that while interacting with the world, part of their neural resources remain allocated to observing and analyzing their own responses. They are simultaneously actor and audience to their own experience. This split attention creates the characteristic pause, the slight delay in responding, the appearance of being somewhere else, even when physically present. Brain imaging studies reveal another fascinating pattern. Reflective thinkers often show stronger connectivity between the DMN and the executive control network, brain regions involved in working memory, planning, and cognitive control. This integration allows them to not just experience thoughts, but to manipulate and examine them as objects of analysis. They can think about their thinking, a capacity psychologists term meta-cognition. However, this same neural architecture creates vulnerability. The hyperactive DMN has been linked to rumination and certain forms of anxiety and depression. When the self-referential network won't disengage, every experience becomes filtered through layers of interpretation and self-analysis. The same mechanism that enables profound self-awareness can trap consciousness in loops of overthinking. To understand reflective minds, we must move beyond neuroscience into phenomenology, the study of lived experience. What does it actually feel like to navigate the world this way? First, there's the constant sensation of multiple parallel processes. A reflective person doesn't just experience an emotion, they simultaneously feel it, observe themselves feeling it, wonder why they're feeling it, compare it to past instances of similar emotions, and question whether the emotion is justified. A single feeling branches into a complex decision tree of meta-awareness. This creates what might be called experiential distance. While emotions are felt intensely, there's also a strange sense of watching oneself from the outside. It's like being both the swimmer and the person on the shore, observing the swimmer. This can make emotional experiences feel less spontaneous, more analyzed, sometimes diluted by the very act of examining them. Second, reflective minds experience time differently. The present moment feels thinner, more translucent, because it's constantly interpenetrated by memory and anticipation. When something happens, it immediately triggers associations. This reminds me of, this might lead to, last time something similar. The pure nowness of experience becomes rare, accessible only through deliberate practice or moments of complete absorption. Third, there's persistent meaning hunger. Reflective thinkers struggle with accepting experience at face value. Every interaction carries potential symbolism. Every pattern suggests deeper significance. Every coincidence prompts questions about causation or purpose. This isn't paranoia or magical thinking. It's the mind's drive to construct coherent narratives from the chaos of experience. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard captured something essential about this mode of being when he wrote about the sickness of infinite reflection, the inability to rest in immediacy, the compulsion to endlessly interpret and reinterpret. For reflective minds, this description resonates not as pathology, but as accurate description of their default state. Perhaps nowhere does the reflective mind encounter more difficult than in social contexts. Modern social interaction privileges certain communication styles: quick wit, emotional expressiveness, spontaneous engagement, comfort with ambiguity, and tolerance for surface-level exchange. Reflective thinkers struggle with most of these. Their processing delay, that pause while internal analysis runs, creates awkwardness and fast-paced conversation. By the time they've formulated a response that feels authentic and precise, the conversation has moved forward, so they often remain silent, their contributions coming too late or not at all. This gets interpreted as disinterest or social anxiety when it's actually cognitive thoroughness. Their need for meaningful interaction creates another friction point. Small talk, the social lubricant that builds rapport and signals friendliness, feels depleting rather than connecting for reflective minds. Not because they're snobs who consider it beneath them, but because their brains don't derive dopamine from superficial exchange. They're wired to experience satisfaction from depth, from conversations that reveal something about the human condition, from ideas that shift perspective. This creates a painful paradox. They often crave connection intensely, but find most available social interactions unsatisfying. They want intimacy but struggle with the gradual building process that requires passing through phases of superficiality. So, they appear standoffish when they're actually desperately seeking the depth that would allow genuine engagement. Furthermore, their ability to read subtext and emotional undercurrents creates complications. They notice when someone's words contradict their body language, when group dynamics create unspoken tensions, when social performances mask genuine feelings. This awareness makes it difficult to participate unself-consciously in social rituals that everyone else navigates smoothly. Research on rejection sensitivity suggests that individuals with high self-awareness often interpret neutral social cues as negative, precisely because they're so attuned to subtle signals. The reflective person notices a half-second delay in someone's smile and constructs entire narratives about what it might mean. This hypervigilance, while sometimes accurate, also creates social anxiety, where less reflective individuals feel perfectly comfortable. Yet this same reflective capacity that complicates social life enables remarkable creative and intellectual work. History's most influential thinkers, artists, and innovators often display highly reflective cognitive patterns. Their ability to hold problems in sustained attention, to examine concepts from multiple angles, to notice patterns that others overlook. These capacities emerge directly from reflective thinking. Carl Jung's entire psychological system emerged from his willingness to reflect deeply on his own mental processes, to take seriously the images and patterns that arose in his consciousness. Virginia Woolf's literature captured the stream of consciousness itself, the texture of reflective awareness. Einstein's thought experiments, imagining riding alongside a beam of light, required the capacity to simulate experience mentally and examine its logical implications. Reflective thinking enables what psychologists call integrative complexity, the ability to recognize multiple valid perspectives, to hold contradictions without rushing to resolution, to construct nuanced understandings rather than settling for simplistic explanations. This cognitive style proves invaluable in fields requiring systems thinking, ethical reasoning, or innovation. The creative process itself often depends on reflective capacity. The ability to observe your own mental processes allows you to notice when a promising idea emerges, to cultivate it through repeated attention, to recognize patterns in seemingly unrelated domains. Many breakthroughs come not from new information, but from novel connections between existing knowledge. and making those connections requires the kind of mental space that reflection provides. Research on openness to experience, a personality trait associated with creativity, consistently shows overlap with reflective thinking patterns. Both involve comfort with ambiguity, tolerance for complexity, and willingness to question received wisdom. The reflective mind's constant questioning, while socially difficult, becomes intellectually productive when directed toward problems worth solving. However, the same cognitive patterns that enable depth can also create psychological suffering. The clinical literature distinguishes between productive reflection and destructive rumination. Reflection moves toward understanding and resolution. Rumination circles endlessly without progress, deepening distress rather than resolving it. For reflective thinkers, the line between these modes can blur dangerously. What begins as attempting to understand a social interaction can spiral into obsessive replaying, catastrophic interpretation, and self-criticism. The mind that's skilled at finding patterns starts seeing negative patterns everywhere, including patterns that don't actually exist. Rumination has been identified as a major risk factor for depression and anxiety disorders. When combined with high self-awareness, it creates a particularly painful loop. You're aware that you're ruminating, aware that it's unproductive, but unable to stop the process. You're watching yourself suffer while simultaneously being the one who suffers, a doubled experience of distress. The psychological term depressive realism suggests that depressed individuals sometimes perceive social situations more accurately than their non-depressed counterparts, who benefit from positive illusions. Reflective thinkers, with their tendency toward accurate observation and their difficulty maintaining comfortable illusions, may be more vulnerable to this clear-eyed view that brings no comfort. Additionally, reflective minds often struggle with analysis paralysis, the inability to make decisions because they can envision too many outcomes, consequences, and perspectives. While less reflective individuals choose quickly based on intuition or simple heuristics, the reflective person sees a dozen valid pathways and lacks clear criteria for selection. This can create functional impairment in daily life, where decisions must be made without perfect information. What creates a reflective mind? Research suggests both dispositional and environmental factors. Some individuals appear temperamentally inclined toward introspection from early childhood, sensitive to stimulation, slow to warm up, more comfortable with internal experience than external activity. But environment plays a crucial role. Childhood's characterized by unpredictability, inconsistency, or the need to carefully monitor caregiver moods often produce highly reflective adults. When your survival depends on accurately reading subtle emotional cues, you develop sophisticated internal observation skills. When you can't trust your environment, you learn to trust your own analysis instead. Paradoxically, both profound early security and early insecurity can produce reflective adults. Secure attachment combined with intellectual stimulation creates the safety to explore internal experience. But trauma and neglect also force the development of hypervigilance and self-reliance through internal processing. Cultural factors matter too. Some traditions prize contemplation, meditation, and self-examination, explicitly teaching reflective skills. Others emphasize action, productivity, and external achievement, offering less support for reflective development. The same cognitive style that's cultivated and honored in one context becomes problematic in another. The healthiest reflective thinkers eventually learn to modulate their introspection, to engage it deliberately rather than being perpetually trapped in it. This requires developing what we might call meta-cognition, awareness of your awareness, the capacity to observe your reflective processes and decide when to engage or disengage them. Mindfulness practices, despite seeming paradoxical for already self-aware individuals, can help by teaching the distinction between observing thoughts and being consumed by them. The goal isn't to stop thinking, but to change your relationship to thought. To experience reflection as something you do rather than something you are. Expressive practices, writing, art, conversation with trusted others, provide outlets that prevent reflection from becoming stagnant rumination. When internal observations find external form, they complete a circuit rather than circling endlessly. The reflective process gains purpose beyond itself. Physical practices, movement, sensory engagement, activities requiring present moment attention offer necessary balance. They remind the reflective mind that embodiment matters, that not all wisdom comes from analysis, that sometimes understanding emerges from action rather than preceding it. Perhaps most importantly, reflective thinkers benefit from communities of similar minds, contexts where depth is normal, where pauses are respected, where conversations can genuinely explore rather than merely exchange. When reflection finds recognition rather than rejection, it becomes less isolating. The reflective mind carries both blessing and burden. The same cognitive architecture that enables profound insight also creates vulnerability to suffering. The capacity that allows deep understanding also produces social isolation. The consciousness that perceives multiple perspectives also struggles with decisiveness. There's no simple solution to this complexity. No way to keep the gifts while discarding the costs. They're structurally linked. You can't have depth without also having distance. Can't have insight without also experiencing overwhelm. But perhaps the goal isn't to fix or change reflective minds, but to understand them, to recognize that human consciousness expresses itself through profound variation, and that the world needs multiple cognitive styles. We need both the people who move quickly through life with confidence and the people who pause to examine what that movement means. We need both spontaneity and analysis, both action and reflection. For those who inhabit reflective minds, the task isn't to become less thoughtful, but to think more skillfully, to cultivate reflection as a practice you control rather than a prison you're trapped in, to honor your depth while also learning when to surface, to value your insights while also accepting that some questions have no answers. In a culture increasingly characterized by distraction, speed, and superficiality, reflective minds serve a crucial function. They remember that consciousness itself is profound, that examination remains valuable, that depth of understanding matters even when it complicates immediate action. The reflective mind may feel like a burden to the person carrying it, but to the world, it's an essential counterbalance, a reminder that not everything worth knowing can be known quickly, and that sometimes the longest journey is the one that moves inward.